Hi, everyone. For March, I decided to read The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's one I've always wanted to read, and that is a classic for a reason. Wow. I'm going to talk about that one in this video. And because it's about looks and vanity and all that stuff, I decided to do a full glam, which is a crazy look, but I had fun. Let's get into it. Okay, so you're probably at least a little bit familiar with the plot, or at least like the main thing of this book. It starts with the painter named Basil Hallward, and he's talking about how obsessed he is with his new muse slash model, who is this like young and hot and handsome man named Dorian Gray. And Basil is like so obsessed with him. Yeah. Okay, so one night while he's painting, Basil's friend Lord Henry comes over, and he's kind of like an aging, wise, closeted or not closeted, I'll come back to him, guy, and he and Dorian get into some deep chat. Lord Henry's basically like, dude, you are young and you are hot, and that is basically all that matters. So, like, don't waste it. Like, use this time wisely. It didn't seem to me to be horrible advice, but Dorian lacks the ability to, like, discern. He doesn't yet understand that, like, old people's advice is always laced with their own regrets, so you should take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? So Basil finishes the portrait and it is exquisite, but suddenly Dorian like freaks out because he's like he realizes that the painting has captured like his peak and that it's all downhill from there. Okay, this is going to be a trust the process. Wow. Anyway, so Dorian makes like a Freaky Friday style wish that he would remain hot and beautiful and the painting would age. And that wish comes true, although he doesn't realize that for quite a bit. So Dorian starts like hanging out on the reg with Lord Henry, who loves to pursue pleasure. And honestly, Dorian becomes like kind of a pretentious twat. So Dorian becomes obsessed with this actress named Sybil Vane, who's like apparently Meryl Streep level good at playing Juliet in R&J. And he tells Lord Henry he wants to marry her, and Lord Henry's like, "No, dude. Like, first of all, women can't be geniuses, so like, fuck right off to hell. But also like, you shouldn't marry a woman. Don't marry them." Which I kind of think is his way of saying like it's not worth having a beard, because we do meet Lord Henry's wife briefly, and she's like really intolerable and like kind of goofy, and it just seems weird that this like sophisticated, intelligent, brilliant even man is with this woman if she's not like his beard. So then Dorian asks Sybil to marry him, and she says yes, and you find out that Sybil's like from a poor family, and you find out that she's not acting for the love of the craft, she's acting to literally feed herself and her family. So when this hot rich guy comes to like holler at her, she's gonna holler back. So she says yes. Dorian begs Lord Henry to go with him to see Sybil in Romeo and Juliet, but that night she like straight sucks, and Dorian is very embarrassed, and Lord Henry's like, "Yo, she's not that good. I'm out," and Dorian gets kind of mad. So he goes backstage to see her after the show, and she's like, "I know I wasn't good. That's the thing. You've made me fall in love with you, and now I see that love is beautiful and the world is real, and I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to be an actress. I just want to live. I just want to be with you." And honestly, for me, this was like the most beautiful and heartbreaking part of the entire book. Hashtag justice for Sybil Vane. But as it turns out, Dorian is a bloodsucker, fame fucker, because he really was just interested in her because she was an actress. And he kind of is like, "You're not good anymore. Like, I'm not interested." And thus, he bled her dry like a goddamn vampire. And later that night, she unalives herself. So that night, Dorian decides to go look at his portrait. And he starts to see that the portrait looks like a little uglier and a little older and like sneering. It's like not attractive. He somehow intuits that it's because he broke Sybil's heart. Like he somehow understands right away what has happened. And he's like, "Oh, I gotta go like make up with her." But then he finds out that she's dead, and he's like not too terribly broken up about it, but he does decide to like cover the painting and keep it hidden. So from there, it just starts to like slowly go out of control. Dorian is engaging in hedonistic behavior, pursuing pleasure. He starts to learn that pretty privilege is a thing and he can kind of get away with whatever he wants. It kind of reminds me of John Hamm's character from 30 Rock, where like everybody is just openly fawns over him and they all like want him to be their tennis coach, even though he sucks at tennis. That's such a great show, but I digress. But basically, Dorian's exploits get worser and worser, and the portrait gets wretcheder and wretcheder until one night when Basil comes over and he's like, "Dude, are you okay?" So Dorian decides to take Basil to show him what has happened to the portrait. And then, for some reason, like decides that this is all Basil's fault, and so he grabs a knife and he gets stabby and he unalives Basil right there on the floor. Dorian calls upon his old friend Alan. And Alan is like this chemist who used to be his bestie. Apparently they were like super close, but then there was a falling out, and now Alan like doesn't talk to Dorian. So this part is very ambiguous and it's like implication central, especially because Dorian calls Alan and asks him to take care of the body using chemistry. I guess like Breaking Bad style. Alan obviously is like, no. And then Dorian is like, oh man, I really didn't want to do this. And he like passes him this note, this secret note, which is written something we never see, but is apparently enough to blackmail Alan into Breaking Bad style getting rid of Basil's body. Like, I feel like we are owed a spin-off about Alan. Like, I want an Alan and Dorian origin story. So a lot happens. I mean, he just keeps acting badly and making bad choices. He goes to a lot of opium dens. He's like just not a good guy. At one point, he goes hunting with a bunch of friends, and while they're out hunting, there's like a gunshot and a scream, and they later find that like somebody has been unalived accidentally, and it turns out to be James Vane, who is Sybil Vane's brother, who had come there like to avenge his sister. And Dorian is like really relieved, but this whole experience has kind of like shaken him and started to make him be like, maybe I shouldn't be like a dick 24/7. So Dorian's conscience now starts to catch up with him, but we don't know if it's actually his moral compass or if it's like the fact that he doesn't like how ugly the portrait's getting and that like so his motives like are not really pure and like wanting to be better. That's kind of what the question is in this whole book, which is very interesting. So he like makes this pledge that he's going to be good, and he tells Lord Henry like, I'm going to be good and I'm starting now. There's this girl and I made her fall in love with me, but I'm not going to seduce her and like lead her on anymore. I'm just going to kind of ghost her. And Lord Henry's like, dude, this poor girl just fell in love with you. She thinks that you're rich and handsome and amazing, and you're ghosting her, and that's your version of being good? Like, okay, wow, I'm putting on these lashes and they are intense, but this is what I'm going for. Super glam. Okay, so when the painting doesn't improve, Dorian realizes that his motives were not that good. They were still sort of selfish, and he starts to fear that all hope is lost. And so he finds a knife and he stabs through the portrait. So when the servants can't find him, they go into the room where the portrait is, and they find the portrait is young and beautiful Dorian, and there is a unalive Dorian on the floor that is old and withered and gross. I'm sorry, this look is weird, but it's kind of serving. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it is serving. So, obviously, this book is an amazing study of humanity. It's how real pretty privilege is, how youth and beauty are valued above everything, how closely tied inner and outer beauty are, how flimsy virtue is, how easy it is to get off the path of the straight and narrow and start to justify bad behavior. All of those things are in this book. This book was written in the late 1800s, and it's a reflection of the time as far as technology and manner and way of being. But this book could have been written at any time. It could be about 2024. The themes are extremely relevant. I mean, R.I.P. Dorian Gray. You would have loved Instagram stories. Am I right? I just wanted to come back to Lord Henry's character because knowing what we know about Oscar Wilde, I really believe that he kind of wrote himself into the book a little bit as Lord Henry. Lord Henry has all the best lines in the book. He's got all the radical quips, all of the brilliant one-liners. He's like jaded. He's kind of tired of living by the world's rules, as I imagine Oscar Wilde himself was, and he pursues pleasure without like being burdened by right and wrong. And I think it's because the world doesn't accept him and what he wants. So he's like, well, screw the world. I think you're not supposed to like him because of the bad influence he has on Dorian, but seeing him the way I was seeing him as Oscar Wilde, especially having read Ballad of Reading Jail, which is the jail that Oscar Wilde was taken to for being gay, um, I just kind of found Lord Henry as being sort of sad, and it kind of made me like have compassion for him, even though he probably didn't deserve it. And so that's the book. I mean, this book obviously caused a stir when it came out. It was called immoral over the years, but I'll end with a great Lord Henry quote from the book, which is, the books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame. And I think that is very perfect for this book. And that's the look. It's a lot, I know, but that was the point. If you have another classic book you'd like me to summarize/analyze on here, I'd be happy to do that. Let me know, and I will see you next time. Bye.